Michael Langston had not anticipated finding anyone in his office at midnight, particularly not a 6-year-old girl diligently scrubbing the floor as if her very existence depended on it. As Michael Langston emerged from the elevator onto the 31st floor, he found the office building almost deserted. The hour was late, well beyond 10, and the majority of the lights in the hallway had already been softened. The quiet of the evening enveloped the smooth, glass hallways like a gentle shroud, interrupted solely by the subtle drone of the air conditioning and the distant sound of his polished shoes tapping against the marble floor. He held his phone in one hand, a weary look carved into the contours of his face, his eyes glancing over a lengthy list of emails that held no appeal for him to address this evening. He swung the heavy glass door of his corner office wide, anticipating a hush and tranquility within. Yet, as soon as he crossed the threshold, he froze. A presence lingered in the air. A diminutive figure crouched near the ground by the window, swaying gently to and fro. He paused for a moment, trying to comprehend the scene before him. A young one it was. A young girl. She appeared no older than 6, her small figure clad in a baggy blue jumpsuit that draped from her shoulders. She wore oversized yellow rubber gloves that seemed ill-fitting for her hands. She knelt, a sponge gripped tightly in one hand, diligently working to erase a stubborn mark from the gleaming tile floor next to the expansive glass windows that framed the city skyline. A modest plastic bucket rested beside her, brimming with murky water that swayed with every shift. Michael lingered in the doorway, caught in a moment of disbelief. For a brief instant, he remained silent, contemplating whether he was conjuring her image, as weariness often deceives the mind after extended periods of exertion. Yet she was undeniably present, with chestnut brown hair cascading in a loose braid down her back and gentle brown eyes that finally met his gaze when she became aware of his presence. He advanced cautiously, his tone soft and filled with disbelief. "What brings you here?" She blinked once, then cast her gaze downward again, her hand pausing on the sponge. "I'm tidying up," she murmured softly. "You're cleaning," he reiterated, his voice now edged with disbelief and escalating frustration. "What's the reason for your cleaning? You are merely a young one." The girl remained unyielding. Her soft voice was composed, unwavering in a manner that seemed incongruous with her youth. "Due to necessity. I find myself in solitude. There's no one else to turn to." Michael gazed at her, momentarily rendered speechless. A myriad of thoughts clashed within him. Legal liability, the question of who had brought her here, how she had managed to bypass security, but none held the weight of the vision before him. A 6-year-old girl working as a janitor, in his office, alone at night. He lowered himself before her, the fabric of his suit pulling snugly at the shoulders, his gaze meeting hers directly. "Who led you to this place?" he inquired. "My aunt mentioned. She toils under the cover of darkness. I assist her. She mentioned that if I lend a hand, she'll allow me to remain." "Remain in which location?" "The space she calls home. It's quite compact. She insists that I must prove myself worthy." Michael tightened his jaw. The fury swelling within him felt unlike anything he had encountered in conference rooms and corporate discussions. This held deep significance. This was a reflection of humanity. He rose suddenly, retrieved his phone, and called his assistant. "Request security assistance, please." At that moment he spoke. Then, casting his gaze down at the girl once more, he felt his demeanor soften. "May I ask for your name?" "Sadie," she replied. "What about Sadie?" "Sadie Monroe." As he approached his desk, he silently echoed her name, his thoughts swirling with intensity. This was prohibited by law. Safeguards. It was expected that people would show concern. He positioned himself behind the desk, observing her on the floor, clutching her sponge as if it were her sole means of survival in an overwhelming world. Security appeared moments later, bewildered until they spotted the child, and then fell silent as Michael issued commands. The individual noted in the janitorial staff's after-hours logbook, referred to as Sadie's aunt, was escorted out of the building before the hour had elapsed. Michael was not interested in her justifications. He was indifferent to her desperation and her urgent need for the job. He was only concerned that she had abandoned a little girl to scrub floors like a servant, concealed behind the buzz of late-night office existence. Upon being asked what to do with the child, he paused, uncertainty clouding his thoughts. She will not be going to a shelter tonight, he stated with conviction. However, the head of security started to speak, yet Michael interrupted by raising a hand. She will accompany me. It was spontaneous, reckless even. He understood the intricate legal entanglements, the extensive documentation, and the potential threat to his impeccable reputation. Yet he remained indifferent. He found himself unable to turn his back on her. Not after what he had witnessed. That evening, Michael Langston, a man renowned for maintaining his solitude, brought home a child he had never encountered before, compelled by her weary gaze that seemed far too old for her 6 years, as she confided in him that she was all alone. And somewhere deep within him, a fissure began to form. Something he believed had long ago solidified into permanence. The journey back was serene. Sadie perched in the rear of Michael's sleek black town car, her legs gently swaying just above the floor, hands arranged with precision in her lap. She remained silent about their destination. She appeared unafraid, merely weary, her gaze wandering to the window where raindrops softened the glow of the city lights. Michael settled next to her, stealing glances occasionally, attempting to unravel the purpose of his actions. He had always made decisions swiftly in business, driven by intuition and analysis, but this wasn't a strategic choice. This was not a choice in any sense. It seemed more like a foregone conclusion. He found himself uncertain about what he had envisioned when he invited her into the car. That she might shed tears? Inquire? Perhaps she would drift off and lose track of her surroundings? However, she chose not to. She stayed poised and serene, remarkably so for someone of her years. The stillness that enveloped them was not awkward, merely weighty, as if they both recognized they had traversed an unseen boundary neither could fully grasp. Upon reaching his penthouse, the doorman cast a curious glance in his direction, yet remained silent. Michael guided Sadie through the elegant marble lobby and into the private elevator, the soft hum of movement enveloping them in a serene atmosphere. Upon entering, she trailed behind him down the corridor with confidence, her petite sneakers making soft squeaks on the polished hardwood floor. He paused before the guest bedroom, a space untouched for years, and pushed the door open. The room exuded a sense of simplicity, with its pristine white walls, a modest bed, a compact dresser, and a solitary reading lamp illuminating the space. "This will be your room for now," he said, his voice wavering as he tried to find the right way to speak to a 6-year-old. "If you require assistance, feel free to reach out. I'll be just across the hall." She nodded once and entered, her gaze sweeping the area with a subtle precision. She made no requests for toys, a story, or even a glass of water. She perched on the edge of the bed, hands neatly folded in her lap, her gaze fixed on him. "Thank you," she murmured gently. He blinked, taken aback by her tranquility. "It was my pleasure." Neither of them uttered another word. After a brief pause, he softly shut the door behind him and lingered in the hallway, releasing a slow breath. He chose not to retreat to his room. Instead, he strolled into the kitchen and filled a glass with scotch. The city glimmered beyond the expansive windows, oblivious to the transformation that had unfolded within his dwelling. He rested against the counter, taking measured sips, grappling with the dichotomy of the man he was expected to be and the one who had just welcomed an unfamiliar child into his home. The following morning arrived sooner than anticipated. Michael, typically awake by 6, was already attired and sifting through emails when he caught the sound of gentle footsteps in the hallway. Sadie stood in the doorway of the living room, clad in the same blue jumpsuit she had worn the previous night. Her hair was tousled, yet her face radiated freshness. She appeared diminutive in the expansive room, yet her presence exuded a serene dignity that suggested a maturity beyond her years. "Good morning," he remarked. "Good morning," she responded. "Do you feel like eating?" She paused, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "Absolutely." He led her into the kitchen, clumsily maneuvering through the uncharted realm of nurturing a child. He refrained from cooking. Chefs visited 3 times a week to prepare his meals in advance. Yet this morning he found himself at the stove, making scrambled eggs, standing rigidly while she observed him from the counter. She savored each bite, taking her time, ensuring nothing went to waste. He observed her more than was perhaps appropriate, captivated by her movements and the silence she maintained unless addressed. The children he had encountered, whether they were his employees' offspring at company gatherings or distant relatives he could hardly recall, tended to be loud, erratic, and frequently insistent. Sadie did not embody any of those qualities. Following breakfast, he reached out to one of his attorneys, asking for urgent investigation into the laws and procedures surrounding emergency guardianship. Uncertainty loomed over him, yet one thing was clear. He would not allow her to return to the woman who had made her toil away, scrubbing floors under the cover of darkness. Not after what he had witnessed. Throughout the day, he toiled away from the comfort of his home, a seldom-seen shift in his usual rhythm. Sadie spent her time primarily in the guest room, engrossed in a collection of children's books that Lydia, the housekeeper, had delivered. Michael glanced at her, anticipating she would be either napping or engaged in play. Instead, she sat cross-legged on the floor, absorbed in her reading, her expression a blend of concentration and tranquility. He rested against the doorframe, observing her for a brief moment until she finally glanced up. "Is it permissible for me to read in this space?" "Certainly," he replied. "Feel free to venture wherever your heart desires." She acknowledged with a nod, yet remained seated. As the city lights started to twinkle one by one outside the windows that evening, Michael couldn't help but reflect on his own childhood. The home for the lost, the frigid mattresses, the ceaseless clamor of other kids, none of whom lingered. At Sadie's age, he came to the stark realization that no one was coming for him. That memory had forged him, sculpting him into a figure who required no one. Observing Sadie in her stillness, so composed and reserved, he pondered the possibilities of what might have transpired had someone intervened on his behalf. If someone had gazed upon him and declared, "I shall not turn away," he found himself grappling with an unspoken truth, a subtle transformation stirring within him. It wasn't swift, nor was it completely easy, yet it was present. As the night deepened and the world outside quieted, she approached his office door and rapped gently, a single knock echoing in the stillness. He lifted his gaze from the screen of his laptop. "I brushed my teeth," she said. "I proceeded to cleanse my hands. Would you like to take a look?" He smiled as if against his own will. "Not necessary. Your trust means a lot to me." Her expression was one of astonishment. With a subtle nod, she pivoted and made her way back to her room. "Sweet dreams, Sadie. Sleep well, Michael." He lingered in the stillness after her departure, gazing at the blank page on his screen, the figures and forecasts abruptly losing their significance. After so many years, the task failed to capture his complete focus. A child lay sleeping down the hall, not yet his, yet somehow already felt like a part of him. He found himself uncertain about the implications of that. Yet he understood that he could not turn a blind eye to it. Michael Langston found himself unaccustomed to the company of another in his dwelling. His penthouse stood as a bastion of isolation, quiet, meticulously arranged, and devoid of warmth. For years, he had found solace in that silence, persuading himself it was tranquility. Yet now, with a little one just down the hall, the silence carried a new weight. Not stifling precisely but observant. It was as though the walls held their breath, anticipating his next move. The subsequent days unfolded in a blur of adaptation. Sadie kept astonishing him with her serene habits, her absence of grievances, and her peculiar, nearly disquieting sense of maturity. She rose at dawn, arranged her bed with precision, and consistently sought approval before handling anything that belonged to others. She exhibited a courteous demeanor, approached tasks with caution, and possessed an unsettling level of independence. Michael observed her with a mix of intrigue and concern. It was clear that this wasn't merely a well-mannered child. This was a child who had mastered the art of not being a weight on others. His mind was consumed by the memories of that night in the office. The sight of her, kneeling with rubber gloves and a sponge, lingered in his mind like a ghost. No child should ever have to experience the burden of labor just to secure a place to rest their head at night. It lingered with him in meetings, throughout phone calls, and even while he examined contracts that had previously captured his complete focus. The more astute part of his intellect urged him that this predicament required a solution, a lawful course of action, a definitive strategy. Yet the softer voice within him, the one he'd overlooked for so long, urged him to take his time, to resist the urge to surrender her to a system that had already let her down once before. One evening, shortly after Sadie's arrival, he discovered her seated by herself in the living room. The television flickered to life, its sound silenced, showcasing an animated film in vibrant colors. She was not paying attention to it. She curled up, her knees pulled close to her chest, arms securely embracing them. He paused in the doorway, taking a moment to gather his thoughts before stepping inside and settling into the armchair opposite her. "Is everything all right?" he inquired. She gently shook her head. "Do you really think so?" She nodded, but after a moment of contemplation, she spoke softly. "Do you think they'll ask me to go?" The inquiry struck him with more force than he anticipated. She averted her gaze as she inquired. Her voice lacked desperation. It carried a sense of acceptance, as if she had come to terms with what might happen and was merely getting ready for it. "I don't want to go," she said after a moment. The stillness envelopes this place. No one raises their voice. Michael leaned in, resting his elbows on his knees, observing her intently. "At this moment, no one is compelling you to go," he remarked. "I'm putting forth every effort to ensure that it doesn't happen to anyone." She finally turned her gaze toward him, her eyes wide and probing, as if weighing the possibility of trusting him. "Will you make that promise?" The term lingered between them, almost daringly. He refrained from making promises, neither in business nor in life. Promises were delicate, filled with emotion. Yet there was something in her careful, delicate inquiry that rendered evasion utterly impossible. "I assure you nothing will harm you," he declared. She offered a subtle nod and averted her gaze, her arms still encircling her legs, though her shoulders eased a bit. Later that night, he wandered into one of the storage rooms at the back of his penthouse, a place he hadn't stepped into in years. It was brimming with boxes from past relocations, sealed crates, remnants of a different existence. While sifting through the items, he stumbled upon a dusty cardboard box labeled, "Michael, Personal." Within the confines lay photographs, books, a worn sweater, and at the very bottom, a file folder marked with his name in bold block letters, a case file from his time in the system. He settled onto the floor, leaning against the wall, and began to turn the brittle, yellowed pages. Observations from social workers, assessments of behavior, documentation of unsuccessful placements. He encountered expressions such as detached, challenging to connect, emotionally remote. He observed the numerous occasions his file had been shuffled from one office to another, noting how few individuals had remained engaged for longer than a few months. He shut the folder and lingered in silence, gazing into the void, burdened by the shadows of a history he believed he had escaped. He wished for something different for Sadie. He was determined that she would not be just another name in a file, another overlooked child lost in the system. He wished for her to remain unaware, as he had, that solitude offered more security than the pain of disappointment. The following morning, he reached out to his legal team. He instructed them to get the documents ready for emergency guardianship. They posed inquiries naturally regarding responsibility, concerning the repercussions in the media, about his reputation, yet he responded to each with an unwavering assurance. "She will be remaining here. Take the necessary steps to achieve your goals." That afternoon, he led Sadie into a whimsical children's store. Initially, she hesitated, grasping the doorframe as if she were an outsider in that space. He needed to softly encourage her to come inside, revealing an array of clothes, books, and toys. She remained still, neither running nor requesting anything. She navigated each aisle with deliberate care, grazing her fingertips over the items as if they were fragile treasures. He selected items on his own, choosing garments in gentle hues, cozy socks, and pajamas adorned with stars. He handed her a shopping basket and encouraged her to select anything she desired. She lingered in silence, her body still, until she finally murmured, "Can I truly?" "Indeed," he remarked. "Whatever you desire." She selected one solitary book, a compilation of enchanting stories. That evening, she settled onto the couch next to him as he read aloud from the book. Her head nestled gently against his shoulder, and in that moment, he sensed a change within him, a warmth that was both strange and exhilarating, yet laced with fear. He was uncertain about the future he could offer her, yet he was aware that he would stand and battle for it. It wasn't out of a sense of obligation, nor was it an attempt to atone for his own upbringing. For the very first time, someone relied on him, and he felt a deep desire to remain. The rain had been pouring relentlessly throughout the morning, a delicate mist adhering to the windows as if the heavens were reluctant to let go of their burden. Michael lingered at the kitchen counter, a cup of black coffee slowly losing its warmth in his grasp, his gaze fixed on the hazy skyline beyond the glass. The city appeared far away, reminiscent of a blurred recollection, unattainable and insignificant. Gentle footsteps whispered against the floor behind him. He could sense it was Sadie without needing to look. She possessed an uncanny ability to glide into rooms unnoticed, as if she had mastered the art of inhabiting the serene voids that lingered in the aftermath of human presence. She ascended onto a bar stool, settling with her hands neatly folded in her lap, her gaze sweeping across the countertop. Though she remained silent that morning, he sensed an unmistakable shift in the air. She nibbled on her bottom lip, casting furtive glances at him, reminiscent of a child peering at a closed door, hesitant to push it open. "Are you in the mood for a bite to eat?" he inquired, his tone soft and soothing. She tilted her head in disbelief. "I have already consumed a banana." Michael placed the mug on the table and leaned in a bit. "How are you holding up?" She paused for a moment, then gave a slight shrug. "Last night I found myself in a dream." He refrained from pressing her. He lingered in anticipation. "I found myself once again at my aunt's home, where she spoke gently. She insisted that I must tidy up the stairs before I could have my meal. I was without my gloves. My hands ache." Michael's jaw clenched, yet he maintained a composed demeanor. "It was merely a figment of imagination. You are secure at this moment. I understand." Her voice wavered slightly, yet it lacked the essence of a dream. It seemed reminiscent of the past. Michael approached the counter, kneeling beside her stool to meet her gaze directly. "I can't guarantee that bad dreams won't visit you again, but I assure you that no one will force you to endure that experience once more. Not as long as I'm present." Sadie gazed down at him, her eyes glimmering yet devoid of tears. "Are you serious?" "I truly mean it." A subtle change occurred between them in that instant, not overtly, but profoundly. It felt like the delicate strand of trust, so slender and vulnerable, had at last been secured at both ends. She offered him a subtle nod, and he tenderly extended his hand toward hers. It felt warm and so small in his grasp, as if it had never been held without purpose. Later that day, they found themselves in the guest room, organizing the fresh clothes and books they had acquired. Michael had made room in the closet, set up a small bookshelf, and ordered a soft rug adorned with a delicate lavender pattern that Sadie had subtly admired in a catalog. She remained composed, not squealing or jumping, unlike how many children would typically respond. She glanced around the room and murmured, "Is it truly mine?" "Indeed," Michael remarked. "This entire collection belongs to you." She delayed her expression of gratitude. She settled onto the rug, her fingers gliding over its intricate texture. After a brief moment of silence, she raised her gaze to him and inquired, "What was your room like when you were a child?" The inquiry took him by surprise. He perched on the edge of the bed, his gaze fixed on the floor, lost in thought. It was tiny, a communal space within the orphanage. Our sleeping arrangements featured bunk beds, and we opted for lockers in place of traditional dressers. My mattress had springs that jutted out if I shifted the wrong way. I found myself devoid of anything that truly belonged to me. Not even footwear, truly. All things were inherited. Has anyone taken the time to read to you? She inquired. No, he murmured softly. No one truly had the luxury of time. Sadie rose and made her way to the bookshelf, choosing the fairy tale book she had previously selected. She made her way back to the bed and set it down next to him. Perhaps I could read to you, she suggested. Michael smiled, taken aback by the profound impact of those few words. I would appreciate that. She opened the book and started to read softly, her finger tracing each word as she went. At times, she faltered, uncertain about the more complex ones, yet she refrained from seeking assistance. She desired to accomplish it independently. He positioned himself next to her, attentive, observing the way her brow knitted in focus, how earnestly she approached the straightforward task of narrating a tale. He had perused countless contracts and sifted through thousands of documents, yet he had never tuned in so intently as he did to that 6-year-old girl, her voice bringing life to the pages of a book with frayed corners and shimmering golden stars on the cover. As she concluded the tale, she nestled against him in silence, her head gently resting on his side. He remained still for what felt like an eternity. I had no desire to. He rested his hands softly on her back, allowing his eyes to drift shut for a brief moment. For the first time since his childhood, he sensed that the silence held meaning. It was brimming, rich with life, comfort, and significance. That evening, Michael reached out to his lawyer to arrange a meeting with a child therapist suggested by the firm. He sought reassurance that his actions were not only legally sound but also aligned with his feelings. He was uncertain about parenting, yet he was eager to discover the way. What truly mattered was his willingness to listen. Once he ended the call, he spotted Sadie at the dining table, immersed in her artwork with the colored pencils Lydia had set out for her. A tall building loomed in the picture, with a little girl peering out from the top window, while a man stood on the sidewalk below, gazing upward. She had illustrated them both beaming. Could that be us? He inquired. Sadie gave a slight nod. It was the very first evening you laid your eyes on me. He settled next to her, his gaze fixed on the artwork. The strokes were askew, the hues flawed, yet it was the most genuine thing he had encountered in ages. Thank you, he expressed. She appeared perplexed. What for? For allowing me to be a part of your narrative. She smiled then, timid and delicate, yet genuine. In that instant, Michael Langston, who had previously thought his life was whole in its solitude, realized with certainty that everything prior to her had lacked an element he had been unaware he craved. Up to this point, the atmosphere in the penthouse had become more vibrant, not in heat but in essence. The previously sterile walls now resonated softly with hints of vitality, footsteps that were not solely Michael's, laughter so subdued it seemed almost miraculous, and the sporadic hum of a child adrift in contemplation. Sadie had started to settle in, and even though she kept it to herself, Michael could sense it in her movements. She stepped into the room with newfound confidence. She abandoned her sketches on the coffee table rather than hiding them away. She drifted into slumber, neglecting to verify the door's security thrice. He observed everything, even the tiniest shifts. Her presence had intricately intertwined with his daily life, prompting him to reschedule meetings, forgo late-night calls, and delve into parenting articles he would have previously overlooked without a second glance. Yet tranquility, particularly that which comes as a surprise, seldom endures without facing challenges. The story unfolded with a phone call on a Wednesday afternoon. Michael sat in his home office, reviewing design revisions for a new property development, when his assistant connected him to an unexpected caller from the Department of Family Services. Her voice was sharp and detached, infused with an authority that caused a tightness in his chest. She conveyed to him, with a blend of courtesy and assertiveness, that a formal report had been filed concerning a minor, Sadie Monroe, who was presently in his care without an official placement or sanctioned guardianship. A subsequent appointment was already arranged for the following day. He lingered in quiet contemplation, his pen still in his grasp, before expressing his gratitude, concluding the call and gazing out the window. The urban silhouette loomed ahead, unfeeling and timeless. He had anticipated this moment arriving. Challenges were a constant presence in his life, never allowing anything to remain untested for too long. He reached out to his legal team without delay, insisting that all processes be accelerated: documents, court motions, interviews, evaluations. He demanded each signature, every essential document submitted within the hour. That evening, he chose not to share with Sadie what had transpired. He was determined to shield her from concern, at least until he had clarity, until he could offer her something tangible. Yet, she must have sensed the change in his aura, as her gaze frequently drifted toward him throughout dinner, her fork poised delicately above her plate. "You're rather silent," she remarked at last. Michael managed to put on a smile. "There's quite a bit swirling around in my thoughts." She nodded as if she grasped the concept, and in certain respects, she likely comprehended it better than many adults might. After she finished brushing her teeth and slipped into her pajamas, she approached his office door and paused in the doorway. "Will you still be around tomorrow?" The inquiry almost shattered him. He lifted his gaze from the screen, locking eyes with her. "Indeed," he remarked, "I will remain present." She nodded and turned to leave, but just before she walked away, she added, "I'll be here too." The following morning dawned under a blanket of gray skies, accompanied by a biting cold wind. The knock from the caseworker arrived right on the dot at 9. Michael opened the door to find a woman in her 40s, her hair neatly styled and a clipboard held firmly under her arm. She presented herself as Ms. Davison, her expression devoid of a smile. She requested to see the child without delay. Michael summoned Sadie, who approached softly, clutching her beloved stuffed fox in one hand. With a courteous nod, she acknowledged Ms. Davison and took her seat as directed. The interview was short yet impactful. The woman inquired of Sadie about her previous accommodations, if she had ever experienced any harm, and whether she currently felt secure. Sadie responded to everything with a gentle sincerity. Her voice quivered just a single time, when questioned about what she would do if she had to depart once more. "I don't know," she said, her gaze cast downward. "I would attempt to become small once more, to avoid any frustration." Michael remained completely motionless at that. The words struck him with a chilling clarity. Ms. Davison jotted down her notes, expressed her gratitude to both, and departed with the same efficiency that marked her arrival. Michael observed the elevator doors shut before turning back inside, his fists balled and his jaw set in determination. He reached out to his attorney in just a few moments. He preferred to remain uninformed. He sought results. He sought out signatures. He desired to see his name on her documents. Later that day, Michael took a moment to sit Sadie down in the living room, carefully and compassionately explaining the situation to her. She absorbed every word, her fox held securely in her embrace. "Will they accept me?" she inquired. He declared that he would not allow it. "What if they make an effort?" "Indeed," he responded. At that moment, that evening, once she had settled into her slumber, he filled a glass and positioned himself by the window, observing the ominous storm clouds amass over the city. After a long time, a sense of dread settled in his chest, not the dread of losing or failing, but the dread of arriving too late. The system was indifferent to love. It focused on structures, qualifications, requirements fulfilled, and standards adhered to. He had consistently navigated through frameworks, even exerting control over them, yet this situation was unlike any other. This held deep significance. The following morning, an update arrived from his lawyer. The hearing for emergency guardianship was set for the upcoming week. It was quick, yet still not quick enough to calm his unease. Until that moment, Sadie's destiny lingered in a realm too ambiguous for either of them to find complete solace. He kept the date to himself. He wished for her not to tally the hours with anxiety. Rather, he made an effort to maintain the status quo, sharing evening readings with her, assisting with minor art endeavors, and lending an ear as she recounted tales from school or her aspirations. Yet it lingered beneath the surface, perpetually. The relentless ticking of the clock was something neither of them could overlook. One evening, while she was absorbed in her coloring at the kitchen table, she inquired, her gaze fixed on her artwork, "If they don't let me stay, will you still think about me?" Michael gazed at her intently for a prolonged moment before approaching and kneeling beside her chair. "Sadie," he murmured softly, "there's no reality in which I can ever forget you." She nodded, yet her lip quivered. He drew her near, embraced her firmly, and remained silent. He couldn't guarantee that the system would perceive what he perceived. Yet he could assure her of one thing. He would stand and battle. Not through language, not through riches, but with all that he possessed. Because she had ceased to be a guest. She was not merely a fleeting gesture of goodwill. She belonged to him, and no document could alter that reality. The days preceding the hearing dragged on, steeped in a tense quiet that enveloped every nook of Michael's penthouse. The facade had crumbled, leaving behind no room for subtle diversions or silent evasion. Sadie had uncovered the reality at last. Michael had attempted to protect her from the burden of it, yet she was far too perceptive, far too seasoned in the realm of doubt to be deceived. She never inquired directly about the hearing, yet he could sense it in the way her gaze lingered on him, in how her eyes tracked his movements as he paced during phone calls, and in the way her voice softened during meals. She felt a tension building within her, uncertain of what the courtroom would reveal or what was truly on the line. She felt an undeniable certainty that it had the power to transform everything. Michael, in that moment, experienced an overwhelming sense of helplessness. He had dedicated his whole existence to crafting mastery over his business, his persona, his reality. However, this was unlike anything else. This was neither a transaction nor a bargaining process. It was a situation he couldn't sidestep with clever wording or dazzle with charisma. The court would remain indifferent to his billionaire status or the fact that he had transformed his company into one of the nation's most esteemed enterprises. They would be concerned with the rules, the established norms, the thorough vetting processes, and the overall stability, questioning whether a solitary individual lacking parenting experience could ever be deemed reliable enough to care for a child like Sadie. Yet, none of his achievements could respond to that inquiry in the manner he desired. He dedicated countless hours to meticulously reviewing documents alongside his attorney, rehearsing responses to potential questions, and strategizing for every conceivable aspect of the hearing. He loathed it, not due to a disdain for preparation, but because it seemed as though he was striving to demonstrate something that ought to have been clear all along. He cherished her deeply. That ought to have sufficed. Yet, within the framework of the system, affection was always deemed insufficient. It needed to be assessed, quantified, confirmed. It needed to be demonstrated through sworn statements, yet those statements could never truly convey the profound impact Sadie had on his life. One evening, merely 3 days ahead of the court date, Michael returned home sooner than his usual routine. He discovered Sadie perched on the windowsill in the living room, her knees drawn up to her chest, gazing out at the skyline. She remained facing away as he stepped inside. He approached and took his place beside her, gazing out at the shared horizon. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and delicate lavender, casting a gentle glow that softened even the harshest of structures. "It's lovely," she remarked. He gave a slight nod. "Indeed it is." She glanced over at him. "Do you believe they'll allow me to remain?" Michael was truthful with her. He had never done so, and he certainly wasn't going to begin now. "I'm not sure," he replied. "Rest assured I will be present, each moment, and I will share all the essential truths." She gazed out the window, lost in thought for what felt like an eternity. What happens if they decline? He pivoted, lowering himself to kneel in order to connect with her gaze. "Then we discover an alternative," he remarked. "We persist in our struggle. However, it's important for you to understand one thing regardless of the outcome." She blinked, her gaze probing his. "You have transformed my entire world, and nothing they utter can diminish that truth." She nodded slowly, her lip quivering as a single tear traced a path down her cheek. Michael lifted his hand and softly brushed it away with his thumb, then embraced her in his arms. She grasped firmly, her tiny hands gripping the back of his shirt as if fearing he would disappear the moment she released her hold. On the eve of the hearing, Michael found himself unable to drift off into slumber. He sat in his office, the city a shimmering haze beyond the windows, and gazed at a folder on his desk. Within were images, endorsements, psychological assessments, and a personal narrative he had revised countless times. Everything seemed insufficient. It felt excessively clinical, lacking any sense of connection. None of it conveyed the depth of his feelings, that Sadie was more than just a child he had saved. She was the one who had ventured into the silent remnants of his existence and restored his sense of humanity. Eventually, just after midnight, he opened a blank page and began to craft his thoughts, not for the judge or the attorney, but for her. He recounted the evening he discovered her in his office, how petite and composed she appeared while cleaning the floor, how her voice had shattered something within him that he hadn't realized was still vulnerable. He captured her inquiries, her subtle courage, the manner in which she never sought more than what was necessary yet offered more than anyone anticipated. He reflected on his transformation, a journey that was neither swift nor simple, yet undeniably lasting. In the end, he penned a single, profound sentence. "I didn't save her. She saved me." The following morning arrived, shrouded in a chill and a dull, overcast sky. The journey to the courthouse unfolded in quietude. Sadie perched next to him in the back seat, adorned in a deep green dress and a petite wool coat that Lydia had selected for her. She clasped his hand throughout the journey, her hold delicate yet resolute. Michael donned a meticulously tailored black suit, his tie impeccably knotted, with every detail executed to perfection. He appeared as though he was prepared for a press conference, yet his heart raced as if it were his inaugural day in court. The hearing room turned out to be more compact than he had anticipated. Without cameras, without an audience. Only the judge, the caseworker, a guardian ad litem, Michael's attorney, and Sadie were present. She perched beside him at the table, her feet dangling just above the floor, her hands neatly folded in her lap. The judge posed the inquiries they had meticulously crafted. Context, earnings, security, intentions for education and caregiving. Michael responded to each one with measured clarity. At that moment, the judge directed his attention to Sadie, posing the day's most crucial question. "Sadie, could you share with me, in your own unique way, the place you envision calling home?" The silence stretched, enveloping the room in a tense stillness. Sadie cast her gaze down at her hands, then lifted it to meet the judge's eyes, before finally turning to Michael. "I wish to remain by his side," she expressed. "In moments of solitude, I found myself questioning my own existence. Yet, in his words, I sense my own presence coming to life. As if I hold significance. I refuse to return to a time when I felt insignificant." Michael felt a constriction in his chest. His eyes blazed with intensity, yet he remained steadfast, refusing to avert his gaze. He gripped her hand more firmly, and this time, she responded with a squeeze of her own. The judge cast a downward glance, scribbled a note, and remained silent for an extended period. When she finally spoke, her tone was soft and soothing. "The court hereby awards temporary guardianship to Mr. Michael Langston, subject to ongoing assessment and consideration. The child shall stay under his guardianship." Michael let out a breath. It wasn't the complete picture, not just yet, but it sufficed for the moment. Sadie gazed up at him, and in that instant, silence spoke volumes for both of them. They had traversed an immense expanse together, a realm that remains unseen by most. They accomplished it together, side by side. The weeks that followed the court's decision unfolded with a tranquility that seemed delicate, as though any abrupt action could shatter it entirely. Michael felt an overwhelming sense of protectiveness, not due to any legal obligation, but because the experience had peeled away the last remnants of separation he had maintained between himself and Sadie. She had transcended the role of a mere visitor in his abode. She had transcended the role of a mere child he had once saved from shadows. She was part of the family now, regardless of what the documents indicated. And she started to sense it as well, not in an overt or theatrical manner, but in the gentle solace that enveloped her daily existence. Her laughter increased. She created illustrations of the two of them and affixed them to the fridge without seeking permission. She whispered his name after a haunting dream, and never did she turn the lock 3 times before settling in for the night. Her trust, once tightly guarded behind those large, brown eyes, was now offered to him freely, bit by bit, almost unconsciously. Michael anticipated being engulfed by the weight of the responsibility. He anticipated a sense of losing grip on his existence. Yet, what astonished him the most was the extent to which he appreciated the person he became in her presence. He had lost all concern for missing a dinner with investors or rearranging a board meeting. He rose with the dawn to prepare a morning meal alongside her. He began to depart from work sooner to ensure he was home in time to assist her with her reading. He felt no longing for the man he once was, for in this moment, he experienced a fullness he had never known in his adult life. Each day spent with her brought a sense of fulfillment to a void he hadn't realized existed. Yet existence had a knack for reminding him that tranquility was ever fleeting. On a Monday morning, Michael found himself in his office at the company's headquarters, meticulously going over the final plans for a luxury development that had faced 2 delays already. His assistant knocked and entered without waiting for a reply, a rare occurrence that only happened when matters were pressing. Her complexion was ashen, and her demeanor was inscrutable. "A visitor has arrived to speak with you," she remarked. "A female individual. She claims to be Sadie's biological mother." Michael rose gradually, the phrases lingering just out of reach of comprehension. He had heard that Sadie's parents were no longer involved. He had found no evidence of a living parent with any rights to claim. Her aunt had left her behind, and the court had paved the path for guardianship. He trailed behind his assistant in silence, heart pounding, mind swirling with thoughts. In the conference room, a woman in her early 30s sat, her long, dark hair cascading around her weary eyes. With her hands firmly clasped before her, she lifted her gaze as he walked in, her face a blend of anxiety and resolve. "I am Emily Monroe," she murmured softly. "Sadie is my child." Michael took his time to reply. He settled into the chair opposite her, examining her features, looking for any hint of recognition. He observed it, the contours around the eyes, the form of the mouth. Sadie's features, reflected subtly in this unfamiliar face. "I heard you were gone," he said, his tone lacking accusation, merely filled with bewilderment. She responded as if that were the case. "I found myself consumed. Everything is gone. When they took her from me, I felt powerless to resist. I didn't put in any effort. However, I have maintained my sobriety for more than a year now. I have completed a recovery program. I am employed. I possess a residence. I wish to see her." Michael felt a wave of unease wash over him. A part of him yearned to unleash his fury, to cast her aside, to shield Sadie from any more turmoil. Yet, the other side, the side that had once been a child longing for someone to return, grasped the essence of sitting before a stranger and seeking forgiveness. "She remains unaware of your existence," he remarked. "I understand. That's the reason I'm not requesting to take her. I simply wish to catch a glimpse of her, engage in conversation with her, perhaps provide some clarification." Michael hesitated before responding. He required some time, yet he was aware that there was no scenario in which concealing the truth would be the outcome. That evening, he settled down with Sadie in the living room and shared, with tenderness and precision, the events that had unfolded. He explained to her that her mother's love had never wavered. It was simply that she had been unwell and adrift for an extended period. He informed her that her mother was still alive, and that she wished to see her. Sadie held back her tears. She refrained from questioning the delay. She simply inquired, "Does she wish for me to reside with her now?" "No," Michael replied swiftly. "She simply wishes to have a conversation. Only if it suits your desire." Sadie remained silent for an extended period. Then she softly asked, "Will you join me?" Michael gave a slight nod. Absolutely. A private room at a neutral location hosted the meeting, attended by a counselor. Emily stepped inside with a flutter of anxiety, clutching her purse as if it were a protective barrier. Sadie sat next to Michael, appearing more diminutive than usual, her expression serene yet enigmatic. Emily knelt down to meet her gaze, refraining from reaching out or applying any pressure. She merely remarked, "You're much taller than I recall." Sadie remained silent, yet she held her ground, not looking away. Emily shared her thoughts for a time, reflecting on her missteps, her feelings of remorse, and the decisions she had taken. She expressed that she wasn't seeking forgiveness, merely an opportunity to voice what had been left unsaid for far too long. Sadie absorbed every word, allowing the silence to fill the space between them. As Emily concluded, an eerie stillness enveloped the room. Then Sadie murmured gently, "I don't recall your voice." Emily's expression twisted in anguish, yet she held back her tears. She nodded and said, "That's all right. Perhaps someday you shall." As they journeyed home, Sadie nestled against Michael in the back seat. She remained quiet for most of the ride, but just as they approached the garage, she glanced at him and inquired, "Will you still be my dad, even if I talk to her sometimes?" Michael experienced a simultaneous shattering and mending of his heart. Without fail, he stated, "That will always remain the same." Sadie nodded and rested her head against his arm once more, as though that resolved everything. Indeed, it happened. She encountered challenges that most children would never know, and she navigated them with a subtle resilience that left him in awe. She made a choice not between two parents, but for her own truth, for transparency, for a love that could exist fully without needing to be shared. In that moment, she revealed to Michael a truth he had yet to embrace. She was no longer merely existing. She was finding her completeness. Spring crept in gradually, as though the city required a moment to melt away the remnants of winter. The trees in the park close to Michael's building started to blossom in gentle whites and delicate pinks, while the air softened, warming just enough to entice people outdoors once more. Kids frolicked on the pavements, lovers strolled hand in hand under the blossoming trees, and a sense of renewal filled the air. In numerous respects, Michael sensed that he was as well. Yet this time it was not by itself. Life with Sadie had transformed into a rhythm, an unvoiced bond that felt both profound and cherished. Amidst the lingering uncertainty, doubts that surfaced during the quiet hours of the night, and concerns that eluded his grasp, there existed a tranquility in her morning calls, in the sketches adorning his office wall, and in the gentle manner she drifted off to sleep in the back seat during those late drives home. She seamlessly integrated into his life, not through chaos but with a calm assurance, and he adapted to her presence effortlessly. The concluding court session for complete legal guardianship took place in late April. This experience, in contrast to the previous one, seemed less a test and more an affirmation of what time and love had already determined. The documents were meticulously examined, the home assessments finalized, and the psychological evaluation delivered. Yet, for Michael, nothing held as much significance as the events unfolding in his own living room each day. As they faced the judge, Sadie grasped his hand firmly, adorned in a light blue dress of her own selection and a silver bracelet that Michael had gifted her just the day prior. Her initials were delicately engraved on the inside. She wept upon opening it, not from sorrow or happiness, but from the gentle flood of being acknowledged, recalled, selected. The judge, a woman in her early 60s with kind eyes and a voice like warm stone, glanced over the final page of the report and offered a gentle smile before announcing her decision. Michael Langston received permanent, legal guardianship of Sadie Monroe, assuming all the rights and responsibilities that accompany the role of a parent. The words fell softly, lacking any grand resonance, yet they settled in, much like the dawn, altering the landscape of existence without seeking recognition. Once they emerged into the brightness, Michael swept Sadie up into his embrace. She pressed her face against his neck and murmured, "Is it all right that I still sense it isn't real?" He embraced her more closely. "It resonates deeply within me, each moment." Her nod was sufficient. In the weeks that ensued, Michael started to set his ideas into action for something that had occupied his mind since the moment he first saw her scrubbing the floors of his office. He acquired a serene structure in Brooklyn, a dilapidated former school, and initiated the transformation into a community hub for children facing challenges. It would serve as a haven for children like Sadie, those who had been neglected, shuffled from one home to another, and repeatedly told in countless ways that they were either too much or not enough. The center would provide a haven, nourishment, creative expression, learning opportunities, and, above all, compassionate ears to hear their stories. He called it the Monroe House, not merely to pay tribute to Sadie, but to acknowledge all that her name had come to signify for him. Sadie frequently accompanied him to the site. She strolled through the incomplete corridors, her eyes filled with awe, observing the walls being painted, bookshelves being set up, and art supplies being unveiled. She selected the hues for the reading room and curated the initial collection of books to adorn the shelves. She posed insightful questions in meetings and greeted colleagues with a quiet yet assured tone. One day, in the main room where the welcome desk would eventually stand, she turned to Michael and remarked, "You used to construct buildings. Now you are creating something new." He grinned. "I'm creating a space where you will always be seen and valued." She moved nearer and grasped his hand. "That is your finest creation to date." Upon the official opening of the Monroe House, there was an absence of press coverage, media presence, and any formal ceremony, save for a modest assembly of children, volunteers, and a handful of Michael's closest colleagues. Sadie led the inaugural tour personally, shepherding a group of children through the corridors with a sense of quiet pride. She guided them to the spots for painting, the corners for reading, and the quiet places for solitude. She articulated the significance of the kindness cupboard, a modest space brimming with necessities, available at no cost to those in need. As the tour concluded, she uttered a phrase that would forever linger in Michael's memory. She shared with the group her understanding of what it feels like to be invisible. This space exists for those who require a reminder of their own significance. As the night deepened and the final guest departed, leaving the building cloaked in a soft glow, Michael and Sadie found themselves on the front steps. They savored ice cream from paper cups, their eyes drawn to the stars gradually unveiling themselves in the sky above the city. Sadie rested her head on his shoulder, and after a prolonged silence, she finally spoke. "I believe we created something meaningful." Michael remained silent for a moment. He gazed at her, noticing how her hair curled at the ends, the bracelet shimmering gently on her wrist, and the child who had once been so quiet she barely spoke above a whisper, now filling spaces with significance simply by her presence. "We created one another," he finally stated. She smiled and closed her eyes, the night embracing them softly. For the first time in their lives, forever felt like a concept that belonged to them. It resonated with a sense of belonging. This narrative, fundamentally, transcends mere rescue. It delves into the essence of recognition. The story revolves around two individuals who exist in their own forms of invisibility. A child whose voice is too faint to capture attention, and a man whose defenses keep him hidden from view. The strength of the ending lies not in its conventional happiness, but in the sense of fulfillment it conveys. The path they traverse, unhurried, genuine, frequently subdued, is rich with choices that change individuals not through dramatic, sweeping events, but in the gentle, enduring instances of presence, attentiveness, and commitment. The last image, capturing them on the steps of the center they created together, resonates because it lacks triumph. It embodies authenticity. It conveys that healing is attainable, family can be selected, and even the most guarded heart can be unlocked when someone courageous steps into its quietude. Perhaps that is the most uplifting reality of all.